Hey there, Mr. Redder here. Welcome back to another episode of r/Entitled People Stories. Our first story we'll be reading today. My mother-in-law stole my cat, so I called the cops on her. After that, dealing with the locker thief in high school. And after that, ex-husband backed out on agreement. Really ended up costing him. Now for every thumbs up this video gets, one Karen does not get to steal someone's cat. I prefer Dalmatians, to be honest. So please punch that like button. And subscribe and turn on notifications for new stories from Reddit every single day. My mother-in-law stole my cat, so I called the cops on her. I'm 20, female, and my mother-in-law, who's 63, can be very overdramatic when I'm involved in certain things. She's a bit of a control freak about everything regarding my partner, male 21. My partner is a bit naive when it comes to the real world, as she has sheltered him for most of it. He moved out last year for school, and she's been trying to ruin his life over the phone. But he has asked chiefly for advice from me since she doesn't offer the best advice. Last year, he lost his grandmother to Alzheimer's. She left behind a cat that we took in and affectionately named Noodle. We have had her for almost a year now. Now to the actual story. My partner and I went on vacation for spring break, and since none of our friends could look after her, we left Noodle by herself for a few days. She had bird videos, more than enough food, and more than enough water. She has been left alone for a lot longer by my partner's parents and aunt, who she had lived with before. So, the day that we were supposed to come home from our trip, we had our car broken into, and they stole my partner's camera and my house and car keys, as well as my ID. We then spent the day trying to find our belongings, and the entire time his mom, my mother-in-law, was calling us and complaining about us leaving the cat. When we told her about the break-in and theft, neither of his parents seemed to care that we felt as violated as we did. All they cared about was us going back to our cat. Finally, as we were giving up our search, he got another call from his mom. She was angry and started calling us cruel to leave Noodle for 3 days. We got mad and asked her why she cared more about a cat who doesn't even really care that we are gone than her kid who had his property stolen and their daughter-in-law who had her house and car keys stolen. She hung up on us after saying she was gonna come to get the cat. I texted her and said that if I got back home and my cat was gone, I'd call the cops. I didn't get a reply. Well, we got home, and lo and behold, our cat is gone, as well as her food bowl and all the things we bought her. I called my mother-in-law and asked if she had Noodle. I didn't even need an answer from her, as I could hear my cat yowling. I told her if she didn't bring her back, I would call the cops. She hung up on me. Well, I called the cops. They went to her house and got my cat back, as well as charged her with theft. I'm getting messages from his family saying that I took it too far and that I should have just gone and gotten the cat. But I know this woman. She would have called the cops on me if I had gone to her house. But the reason I may be the jerk is that she may face jail time if I press charges, and she suffers from mental illness. Not the jerk. She broke your boundaries and is paying the consequences. She messed around and found out. I'm assuming your partner is on your side? OP. Honestly, I think he's just happy to have our cat back. He's a little upset about the charges. Everyone sucks here. You say you leave your cat alone for longer than 3 days with no one to watch her when you could just hire a professional or bring her to a cat boarding facility where she will be cared for. Leaving an animal alone with no one to check up or care for her is just negligent. It would be one thing if someone came by once a day, but you just say Noodle is left alone. Your mother-in-law should not have stolen the cat, but it's not up to you to police her feelings either. She is allowed to care about the welfare of a sentient animal over stolen, non-sentient stuff. Change your locks and keys so your mother-in-law can't just come into your house, but also take better care of your cat. Hire a professional pet sitter or someone to at least check up on Noodle once a day, rather than just leaving her alone for days on end. OP. We couldn't afford to board her, but we did have a friend come in and check on her when we realized we would be gone longer than anticipated. Don't feel bad. A few days is totally fine for cats. I have automatic feeders and fountains and robot litter boxes, plus some pet cams to see how they're doing, and I do this pretty often with my 2 cats. I've gone 5 days before and felt bad because they didn't get snuggles in that time, but I watched the cams almost constantly and they just napped and ate anyway. Dealing with the locker thief in high school. This was back in the early 2000s, probably 2003 to 2004 school year. Throughout the entire year, there was a crime wave of people having their things stolen out of their locked lockers. Not everyone, but enough that everyone knew someone who it happened to. The school's only defense about this was that it was our fault for sharing locker combos with our friends. They also charged us every time we had to get the combination changed on a locker, like after a theft for instance, because it was assumed to be our fault. Well, I had my graphing calculator taken out of my locker. I also never gave out my combination to anyone, mostly because my friends were jerks and we pulled crap on each other all the time. So I was out $150 for the calculator and another $150 to change the combination, getting a locksmith to change out the lock. This is 2003 money, so it's a bit more than now. To anyone who has ever had to buy a TI-86 in 2003 or 2004, you'll know how much the things cost. Well, my dad was drinking buddies with one of the county detectives. I'll call him Detective Buddy and/or Uncle Buddy. He went in to talk to the school about these thefts going on, so he could get the security camera for the day my calculator went missing and got completely brushed off, as it was a non-existent problem, and he must have given out his locker combination. The principal told him he would need a warrant to get the camera footage. Then when he got the warrant, the school fought the warrant in court, citing student privacy. Cue the pro-revenge. Detective Buddy shows up at our house with a laptop and a laptop bag. He's like, "Throw this in your locker and tell everyone you know about your brand new laptop." Okay, sure, Uncle Buddy. 3 days later, I show up at my locker between classes and the laptop is gone. The bag too, nowhere to be seen, as is a 24-ounce bottle of Coke and possibly some pens. I take my phone out and text him that the laptop got taken. "Stand by for the crab show. Oh, and you reported the theft to the police, FYI." He replies back. "Okay," I replied, confused. I got about the rest of my day and I don't hear anything back. The following morning, Detective Buddy comes to the school with 3 uniformed officers and pulls a student, Dave, out of class, as well as his mom, who works in the front office. The principal is upset. I don't actually hear the cops, but the principal is upset to no end that he had the audacity to accuse them of theft, and he couldn't just take them out of his school, etc., etc. Well, turns out there was a tracker in the laptop bag, and Uncle Buddy got a warrant to search a particular house. The laptop had a value of over $1,000, making it a felony. The next afternoon, he set up a tent with a table just outside of school grounds. He also had a banner across the top, "If you had something stolen from your locker, see me." By the next morning, Dave and his mom made the paper. Apparently, Dave allegedly used his mom's login information to get onto the school network and get the locker combinations for basically everyone. Then he just opened random lockers looking for valuables to steal, if he didn't get info of a specific locker to steal from. When he set up the stand to get more people reporting thefts, he racked up an astounding number of charges. Each locker counted as a separate misdemeanor unless the stolen object was worth more than $1,000, in which case it was a felony. In less than a week, Uncle Buddy opened and broke an investigation, and they charged Dave and his mom with 9 felonies and 35 misdemeanor charges. When I finally got the story from Buddy, he explained what the situation was. He had me stash a brand new laptop that had a GPS tracking unit stuck in it in my locker, then get it stolen deliberately, and then he got a warrant to search the property it had been taken to. Now, the fun thing to stress is that the laptop was over $1,000 value, pushing the theft from a misdemeanor into felony level. There was also another 8 felony charges, stuff like jewelry that was taken from other people's lockers and recovered. So any of the locker break-ins that amounted to over $1,000 stolen was a felony charge, and less than $1,000 was a misdemeanor charge. Cool thing was that because the calculator and the laptop were separate days, and the combination changed between the days, he caught a felony and a misdemeanor charge off me alone. The 9 felony thefts ended up in $12,000 range total, and the 35 misdemeanor charges were somewhere in the range of $3,000 total in value. Now, that's an awful lot of stuff stolen, but I need to stress that this is only what was proven stolen. Like, this is what they caught him with in his possession and that they could trace back to someone. They also didn't let them plead to anything. It was Podunkville's highest profile crime in years, and without a doubt, one of the worst crime sprees the county had seen in decades. Next up on the revenge. Everyone who had been charged $150 to get their locker combinations changed sued the school district in a class action lawsuit. The justification was that the school did nothing to investigate the 44 proven and more than likely 200 plus cases of locker theft, and then charged money to get the locker combinations changed. There were 218 people in the class, and in total, everyone got $85 after attorney's fees. The principal also lost his job for being a bonehead and not bothering to attempt to deal with the massive problem that was reported to him going on at the school. The fun thing I need to point out is that the school brought in a locksmith to change out the locks. That's why they justified charging $150. Well, the school already paid the $150 a locker, but they also had to return $100 per locker, meaning that they were out $21,800 plus their legal fees for that class action suit. Next comes the criminal trial and the fallout. The prosecutor's deal was 10 years in prison, 5 in juvie and 5 in adult prison, for Dave and 15 for Dave's mom. Well, they refused that deal and it went to trial. Dave got 1 year in prison for each felony, the state minimum, and 1 month probation for each misdemeanor. So 9 years plus 35 months of probation. His mom received 18 years of jail and 6 years probation. Having attended much of the best parts of the trial, I will say this. They had Dave on camera entering 20 plus lockers, and they had them in possession of stolen goods for every single charge they made against them. The judge was also not amused that there were likely other reported crimes that they got away with because they couldn't prove it or they weren't reported. Dave's mom got it worse. That was a fun sentencing to show up for. But the most important thing is that I got my graphing calculator back. It had my name engraved inside the battery compartment. I still have it, as well as a cool story to tell. Ex-husband backed out on our agreement really ended up costing him. My ex-husband and I had a great divorce. Even though he cheated on me after 12 years and 2 kids under 4, I really wanted to do things differently than my parents did during their divorce. I never said anything negative about him and tried very hard to defend him when the kids got upset with him. I extended invitations to the woman he left me for so she would not feel uncomfortable with me, and we became friends. She was basically their stepmom, so why not include her on everything? On holidays, we all had one big dinner. He and her and me and my boyfriend. This made everyone comfortable, and the kids never had to choose one side or the other, as we were all on the same page. It was such a great relationship that when I had back surgery, I recovered at his house, and she cooked for me. He and I were coaches for the kids' basketball and baseball teams, and I helped at their wedding 13 years later. This was not easy for me, as he moved to another state to raise her kids, leaving me to raise our sons on my own. She quit her job when they got together, and I had to return to work to support my kids. But I needed to keep the resentment and bitterness away from my kids. All of this sets the tone for the divorce, but when he initially left, I spoke to a lawyer and got a separation agreement that was really great for me. He asked that I not take half of his retirement, but instead he would pay this amount of money in child support and an additional amount in alimony, because he was making a lot of money and I was a stay-at-home mom with a country club membership. Yuck, I hated saying that, but it was only to set the scene. Normally, alimony ends after 5 years, but because I didn't get half of the 401k, the only condition on ending it was it would end on my remarriage or me passing. He agreed with all of it. The thing is, when he left me to move down to where she lived, he left his cushy job and took this promising, but not delivering, position that really did him over financially. But he never went back to the lawyer to get child support or alimony reduced. Instead, he borrowed from his mother. When I discovered he was mooching off of her, I suggested to her that she stop paying for him when he finally got back on his feet. She never would do that and continued paying for his life and her to be a stay-at-home mom, even co-signing for a second home for him when he finally moved back to raise his kids. Hers had graduated and lived in his old house. Ours were in high school. He did come to me and ask if I would accept regular child support and half of the alimony. Then later, when he was really earning money, he would pick back up on the past due amount. Not wanting to make waves in an otherwise great divorce, I said yes and kept track each month of what was owed in a shared spreadsheet with him so he could see how far in debt he was getting each month. He ended up owing me $1,000 per month times 10 years, but he said when the kids aged out of child support, he would continue to pay the same amount to make up for the alimony, which totaled $120,000. When my daughter aged out, he continued to pay the same amount, putting a small dent in what he owed for 3 years. Then, as soon as my son aged out, 2 weeks after he joined the Marines, he called me and told me there was no way he was going to continue paying me for the next amount of years, and I could take him to court if I wanted to, but there is no way he would pay me another cent. This completely blew my mind, as we had such a fantastic relationship and it came out of nowhere. I was completely freaked out, but I took his advice. I contacted an attorney, I sent all his calls to voicemail, per my attorney's advice, and I took him to court. The best thing was, prior to the hearing, my attorney put a lien on both homes he had, so he could not change ownership to his mom or wife prior to the court hearing. I still have the phone call recording when he realized this and the horrible names he called me for doing that. Since I had kept such immaculate records from the day he changed payments and he was aware of his debt rising each month, it was a slam dunk for my attorney. Instead of making small payments for a few years, he had 30 days to pay me $120,000 in full. Unfortunately, the kids now have to choose which parent they visit on holidays, but that was not my fault. I was willing to continue, as is, and not put any strain on the family relationship. And for those who are wondering, yes, he did cheat on her 2 times before they got married, but she had quit her job when they got together because she found a sugar daddy and had nothing to fall back on and nowhere to go, so she stayed with him. Since we were friends, she shared this info with me, as I would understand what she was going through. Edit. I got my money on day 29. No other payments will be made. Edit 2. I think the reason he went crazy on me was his mother refused to pay anymore when my son aged out, but I explained that he owed a ton of back pay. That's when he said, "If you think I'm making payments to you forever, you're nuts." She had been paying his child support for 10 years because he never went back to a great paying job, even though he could have. Yes, I went to work after separation and have a great career, but my income was still 1/4 of his when we were together because we moved every 3 years for his career. He wanted me to stay at home when the kids were born. Thanks for the awards and for the mean DMs. I'm okay with you calling me names because you don't matter to me at all. Am I the jerk for demanding my son take his daughter on his family trip to Disneyland? I got pregnant and had my son, Julius, who's 28 now, about a month after my 18th birthday. I tried to do my best for him and he got into a good engineering school, but at 19, he got his then girlfriend, Isa, pregnant, and they had Annabella together. I've been the one who has mostly raised her. Isa had to return to her home country, but her and Annabelle spend July together and FaceTime every night. Julius got married to his girlfriend, Katja, after graduation, and they have 2 wonderful boys together. Annabella lives with me and not with them. The thing is, Julius never spends any time with Annabella. He doesn't even call her to say goodnight, but she loves him so much. It's like once a month he'll show up with a box full of toys, spend a day with her, and then go back to his family. It hurts her so much that he doesn't spend time with her because he's her hero. I'm just grandma. And no, he doesn't act this way because of his wife. Katja would love to have Annabella move in with them. She once brought up the idea, and she went on about all the things they could do together. She would love to be her stepmom, calls her princess, sweetie, and so many nice nicknames. The only reason they haven't is because Julius has said she should stay with me. A few days ago, Julius told me that he and Katja were planning a trip to Disneyland in August. I told him that Annabella would be so excited and he should tell her on her birthday, and he just blankly told me she's not coming and the trip is for his boys. I made it clear to him that he needed to bring her on the trip, and he just called me a jerk, which he's never done before, for trying to control him. I admit that I was a bit controlling in my reaction, but I don't think I went that far. So he just pawned his kid off on you for eternity? Does he send you child support? Does he make any actual effort to be a father to his daughter? Not the jerk. These are great questions. I'm wondering if he does. If not, he's worse than we all already think. OP says he shows up once a month with a box of toys, so I'm inclined to think that he doesn't. It's wonderful that OP is selflessly providing for Annabella, but he needs to step up as her father and actually contribute, not the jerk. I think Grandma may need to cut her son out entirely. She can't force him to want to be a good parent, but she can protect her granddaughter. This is what I came here to say. He needs to sign all rights away or something. Her stepmother cares more for her than he does. He's gonna do this crap, and eventually it's going to affect his daughter's relationship with her brothers. Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or her son? Please let us know. My heart breaks for that girl. Am I the jerk for being angry at my stepdaughter? I, 32 female, married my husband, 39 male, almost a year and a half ago. He's a pretty successful man, so he has provided everything his 21-year-old daughter, my stepdaughter, ever wanted. I don't want to call her spoiled, but she didn't work a job until she was 19, and has her tuition completely paid for by my husband and his ex. She apparently makes up for it by supposedly being smart and going to a good college. The reason that I'm writing this is because she is graduating this summer and we wanted to make a whole trip out of it. After my husband told her the plans, Stepdaughter made it very clear that she does not want me to be at her graduation and blames it on not having enough tickets. When my husband brought up that she has a lot of tickets, she said that her last one is going to her best friend's mom. But I think it's unfair, and she's just making up excuses at this point. When my husband suggested that dinner might be a great way to include me, she then explains that she already made dinner reservations for a large party and she cannot add more people. My husband thinks that it might not be the best idea for me to go to her graduation, but I really wanted to go through with this trip. All of my husband's friends and family talk so highly of Stepdaughter, and I cannot find out why. Stepdaughter has slandered my job. I would try to explain to her that I did not have a lot of opportunities growing up, and she would then talk about how her mother is so successful despite all that she has been through. She tells my husband that he's gonna go broke because he has to support me as if he isn't supporting her through college. I've had to deal with other people constantly celebrating her and her accomplishments, and I've had enough. Am I the jerk for being annoyed that I can't go on the trip with my husband? Edit. He is well off, but not wealthy, and him and his ex both provide for her the same. That is why I was confused about her saying he was going broke while supporting me. Edit. He had his daughter at 18 or 19 and was with his ex until 4 to 5 years ago. I was not with him during his previous marriage, and he dated someone else before me. Edit. I'm going to answer some questions. I dated my husband for a little over a year before we tied the knot. I wanted to go to her graduation because it's important to my husband, and we planned the entire trip and booked a hotel. Never did I state that I wanted my husband to cut off Stepdaughter or choose me over her. One of the things I admired about him was how he spoke of his stepdaughter before I met her. I could tell he loved her so much, and she was his greatest achievement. I understand it is her day, but I wanted to celebrate with my husband because I know it's a big day for him to celebrate as well. He has worked hard to give that young lady a good life, and it is paying off. I do not care for or want to take his money. I was trying to state my frustrations because I feel as if I'm being punished for simply not being her mother. She doesn't want to know me. Okay, but I find it unfair for myself and my husband. Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or her stepdaughter? Please let us know. Am I the jerk for insulting my mother-in-law after she made comments about me not wanting kids? I, 25 female, have 4 older siblings. Seeing my parents regret having kids and struggle financially and physically, I realized at a young age I didn't want kids. I love them, and spoiling my nieces and nephews is what keeps me alive, but I've never wanted any of my own. I worked my whole life set on the one career, so why would I give it up for 18 years of regret? My husband doesn't want kids either, but too loves our nieces and nephews. Well, my mother-in-law is a strong believer that he should be the breadwinner and I should be a stay-at-home mother. She's very old-fashioned, and so is my husband's sister. My mother-in-law doesn't have any respect for me after finding out that I will not be having kids. Every time I see her, she makes comments like, "At your age, I already had this many kids," or "What are you even doing with your life with no kids?" It upsets me, but my husband says to just ignore her, and we only have to see her at family events. Now, here comes the bad part. My father-in-law never wanted kids, but my mother-in-law baby-trapped him, and when my husband was 10, they divorced. Mother-in-law was depressed for a very long time and is still in love with him. The other day, me and my husband were invited to a small family get-together, and of course, we went. Everything went well, and I was having fun. I picked up my husband's cousin, who was only 6, and started playing with her. Mother-in-law took notice of this and walked over to me and said, "See, isn't that easy? Now you just have to have your own kids and do this. I mean, what else could you possibly be doing with your life? Stop slacking off." This ticked me off. In the moment, I just said, "Oh, I don't want kids." Hey, kind of like father-in-law. Who knows? Maybe my marriage will work out unlike yours because you're too selfish to take others' feelings and wants into account. Mother-in-law stood there, absolutely dumbfounded, before bursting into tears. Everyone immediately rushed over, and when mother-in-law told them, some laughed and some were mad. I felt so awful, I wished I had never said it. My husband dragged me to the car and said that although she had it coming, I could have found something else to say instead of absolutely tearing into her like that. I've received a few messages saying the same thing, but mostly calling me messed up. So, am I the jerk? Not the jerk. That was long overdue, and if your husband had handled his mom sooner and not let it go on for so long, it all could have been avoided. Exactly. Just ignore it is the biggest cop-out from husband. Not the jerk. It's always the worst when people constantly degrade and belittle others are absolutely besides themselves when someone has the audacity to be honest with them. Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or mother-in-law? Please let us know. Mother-in-law had it coming. I hope she learns to respect other people's decisions from now on. Am I the jerk for expecting my husband's truck to be a shared resource? I, female 31, have been with my husband, male 31, for 10 years. We've lived together for most of that time and have a kid and a dog together. This particular issue started a few months ago when he bought a new truck. The night before he had to pick it up, about a 1-hour drive, I asked him to take the dog out to go to the bathroom. He refused, saying the dog is mine and therefore my responsibility, not his. Technically, the dog is an ESA for me, and when we got her, we agreed that I would do the majority of the care for her. This has held true, and this was the first time in over 2 weeks I had asked him to do any of the caretaking for her. I told him that if he couldn't do something as simple as take the dog out to go to the bathroom for me, I wouldn't be spending my day off driving him to get his truck. The next morning, he asked me to drive him, and I told him no, reminding him of our argument the night before. He ended up Ubering there, which cost $100+. A few weeks ago, I asked for his help picking up a mattress as my vehicle is a small car. He refused unless I contribute $70 a month towards his truck payment. His reasoning was that A, since I'm benefiting from the truck, I should be helping to pay for it, and B, I didn't drive him to pick up the truck, so he doesn't want to use it to help me. We had a pretty big fight about this, and I argued that as his wife, I should have access to his resources, obviously within reason, without having to contribute to that specific resource financially. I eventually apologized for not taking him to pick up the truck, and he agreed that he would help me with things like this in the future. A few days later, he helped me deliver a desk I was selling about 5 minutes away. After the fact, he asked for half of the money I had earned from selling the desk. I refused because, again, I feel that his truck is a shared resource, and he's my husband, not a contracted delivery driver. He seemed annoyed by this, but didn't push it. Today, I asked for his help picking up a pull-out couch for our guest room. He said no. When I asked him why, he said, "Because I don't like to help you." He then further explained, "You won't pay for part of the truck payment, and you didn't give me some sort of money from your desk, so I don't really want to use my truck to help you." I just said, "Okay," and walked away. I'm really confused and unsure here. I mean, obviously, I feel like it's fair that he would use his truck to help me every once in a while, just like I use my resources to help him when I can. To me, that's part of being in a committed relationship with someone, and how our relationship has operated up until this ongoing issue with the truck. But am I the jerk for not paying part of the truck payment? For context, he had planned to pay the whole payment himself until he, and I quote, realized I would benefit from it so much, and that it seemed unfair to him. Y'all need marriage counseling. Do they even like each other? It doesn't seem like it. Imagine this is your marriage. I'm so confused. They're so toxic. I can't imagine my fiance ever acting like this. But then again, mine drives all over the city to get my favorite soup and all kinds of meds when I'm sick and doesn't charge me for it like I'm sure this dude would. Well, who do you think is the jerk? OP or her husband? Please let us know. If Reddit boy didn't use his truck to help me, he'd need a new head. Helping out doesn't mean giving you $100,000. Disclaimer, all names have been changed. This story occurs on my wife's side of the family, so I have a second row seat rather than a front row seat for most of this. My wife's Aunt Louise is a great lady. She and her husband lived in the San Francisco Bay Area and bought their home in the late 1970s. After her husband passed a few years ago, she sold her home for over $1 million and moved back to live closer to her family where she grew up, farming areas in Southern California. She's in her late 60s. Aunt Louise has 3 kids, who are all now in their 40s. The 2 oldest are nice, normal people. Her youngest, Kay, is a real piece of work. She meets all the criteria for a psychological diagnosis of narcissism. This is just one of literally dozens of stories I could tell. First, some backstory about Kay's husband, Pedro. He was a good provider. About 10 years ago, things began going well and began making pretty good money. To Kay, however, Higher income meant more spending, and soon she was buying a new car every 2 years. They went on cruises. She had all the latest and greatest gadgets. As the old MTV tagline used to go, too much is never enough. To augment her lifestyle, she would routinely run to her mom, Aunt Louise, with a sob story or another. We don't know about the true figure, but I've heard rumors that Aunt Louise has given her more than $20,000 over the past few years. Kay and Pedro managed to keep their heads above water, but when lockdown hit and the state of California ordered economic shutdown, money became tight. Then in October, the company went out of business. He found another job, but was essentially starting his career over. Naturally, they'd begun fighting about money, and 2 weeks ago, it comes to a head. After hearing the blasphemous word "no" one time too many, Kay announces she's getting a divorce. Being California, she naturally expected the courts were going to give her one last payday from this poor guy: her car, their house, his 401k, and generous alimony. However, in her greed, she forgot that Pedro had kept draining his 401k to pay off credit cards, and all those papers about the house she was signing every couple of years was to refinance their house to pay off more credit cards, so there's almost no equity. And with having to start his career over, alimony wasn't going to be that great. So Kay does what she always does, goes running to her mother, Aunt Louise. Aunt Louise is naturally sympathetic and urges Kay to try and reconcile, but failing that, she might be able to help her out. Literally 2 hours later, Kay texts Aunt Louise with a photo of a pricey condo and asks for $100,000 to cover her down payment and costs to furnish it. Aunt Louise naturally pushes back, telling Kay that helping out didn't mean $100,000. She had meant letting Kay live with her while she got back on her feet, writing a check for a security deposit and first month's rent, and maybe helping with some car payments. At this point, Kay totally flips out. Here are the things my wife said were direct quotes. I'm getting these third hand, so they might be slightly off. "I can't believe my own mother would be so selfish. What difference does $100,000 make? You're not going to spend it all anyway." Meaning before Aunt Louise passes. "Just sell some stocks or something." Aunt Louise, fortunately, does have someone who manages her money, but she stays on a strict allowance. After Aunt Louise held out, Kay had begun polluting Facebook with passive-aggressive messages about finding out people's true colors. My wife is actually hoping she calls to ask for help, specifically so that she can let her have it. "Support our channel by joining as a member today, and we'll give you a shout out in our next video." Or come watch this video next. You won't believe what Karen does in that one.